Progress already been made in getting the Bahamas delisted. The welcoming assurance following the Financial Services and Trade Minister Brent Simonet and Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquist's decision to head to Brussels last week in hopes of having the European Union's Code of Conduct group reassess the Bahamas' position as a non-cooperative tax jurisdiction. That, of course, did not happen, as the delegation was told that there was insufficient time to review the information before making a decision, and the Bahamas was subsequently blacklisted. According to the minister, making this happen will include changes to the country's legal and regulatory framework, as well as additional accounting and reporting obligations.
We've also produced for the EU a comprehensive timetable that includes consultation with the industry, a set draft legislation, which will be debated in the House of Assembly shortly, and the timetable is reflective of our recent meetings with the Code of Conduct group and member states. So we detailed what we'll do in March, which is obviously continue the talking points with the OECD. In April, we will evaluate and address these concerns. In June, we'll be reviewing the concerns, and in July, we'll publish, obviously, and have consultation with stakeholders about any potential draft legislation or changes in regulatory framework or additional accounting or reporting requirements. And the list goes on.
Now, according to the minister, while the EU's Code of Conduct is comforted by the schedule, there is no room for complacency.
We must work to address the concerns of the Code of Conduct group within the agreed timetable, which we feel is reasonable, and we must be consistent in ensuring the interests of the Bahamas is well represented.
The financial services sector is responsible for 15% to 20% of the country's GDP. Now, aside from his role as Minister of Financial Services and Trade, Mr. Simonet also has oversight for the Ministry of Immigration. During the first 6 months of the 2017-2018 fiscal year, some 5,468 illegals were repatriated.
In 2017, took on some 203 trainee officers. I have 302 established immigration officers, plus clerical staff at my ministry. But in the 2017, 203 trainee immigration officers were taken on. The difficulty with that exercise, and you hear some of your colleagues mention to you, that in most cases, security vettings was not undertaken before those people were engaged, nor were proper education and qualification requirements taken on. So, to date, 121 of those persons have qualified, of the 203.
Mr. Simonet further noting that much is being done to deal with the backlog of immigration applications.
30 files were returned to the Department of Immigration, because those files were not on the official list. So somehow 30 names popped up and got hired that were not on the official list. So we're still working through those names. But of those 30, 4 of them have failed a drug test. So we have 10 issues, and then we have 10 issues of negative vettings. We've had several. We've had 14 that are not qualified by academic requirements. So there's a basic academic requirement to be engaged in the public service. So 14 have not met with that, and 14 and 4 have not met any of the BGCSE requirements whatsoever.
Now, for those interested, the site is immigrationpending.mofa, as in Ministry of Foreign Affairs.gov.bs. Meantime, the Prime Minister's landed on the wrong side of an opposition senator following insinuations he appointed a magistrate to arraign hundreds of illegal migrants last week. Amjad Knowles has the story.
Soon after their illegal landing here in the Bahamas, nearly 200 Asian migrants were sent back home following their arraignment in Inagua. That was made possible by Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who at the time also served as the acting Minister of Immigration. You see, he admitted sending a magistrate to the far-flung Family Island to oversee legal proceedings against the group. The former Immigration Minister Fred Mitchell yesterday pointed to the fact that the PM may have overstepped his boundaries.
This is particularly important, not just because of the general questions about interference in the judiciary, but given the interruptions of the House of Assembly by the FNM on the false accusations made against the Minister of the government about interference in the judiciary during the time the PLP was in power. Certainly, the Prime Minister, as a matter of law, has no legal role in directing magistrates. This is a role for the Chief Justice or for the Chief Magistrate. The Attorney General, as the Minister for the Administration of Justice, would normally be the one who negotiates or talks to the head of the judiciary about administrative matters dealing with the court, which is what the disposition of a magistrate is.
Mr. Mitchell says the situation could have become a lot more difficult if the migrants who were charged with illegal entry had pled not guilty.
The government should also be aware that this may be fine in these circumstances, and they're happy because the person's pleaded guilty. But what if they plead not guilty? They say, no, we're not guilty. So 200 of them, suppose they had gone and now says, we're not guilty. What are you going to do? You have the trial right then and there. Then you have arguments about whether they didn't have right to counsel, so on and so forth. Are you going to give them bail? And if you give them bail, where are they going to go? Or if you don't give them bail, where are you going to hold them until you get around to trial? And the way the illegal migrant and the regular migrant traffic works, it's a racket. So easily people could be organized to do this and jam your entire system because you tie yourself to this.
Meantime, Dr. Minnis ordered that the migrants' vessels be sunk. He also stressed that it will now become standard practice to send a delegation to islands where migrants are detained to facilitate fair hearings and deportations. For JCN News, I'm Amajal Knowles.
Well, disappointed and inhumane, just two of the words noted human rights attorney Fred Smith used to describe the government's recent proclamation that it's set to tear down all structures in shanty towns that fail to meet building code standards. Labor Minister Dion Folk said as much during his visit this weekend to the shantytown community of the Mud in Abaco. But Mr. Smith contends that this will only heighten the current social tension between the Bahamian and Haitian communities. Furthermore, he charges that some of these communities are generational properties and are as Bahamian as some of the prominent inner-city constituencies.
I am very disappointed that this government would behave in an inhumane manner towards people who live in these communities. I know that they're called shanty towns, but they are actually homes, they are communities. That is where people have been born and or have grown up all of their lives. In fact, some of these communities constitute generations of families. Just like Baintown or Grantstown or many other communities that have grown up in the history of the Bahamas.
Now, Mr. Smith went on to call on the government to be a bit more compassionate in its approach to dealing with this issue.
Urge the government to adopt a far more constructive and humane approach. There are many people in these communities that have nowhere else to go. Everything that they own, everything that they have created, they have lived there all of their lives. It's time for the government to be a bit more imaginative and respectful of people's lives, possessions, homes, and communities. I urge Minister Folks, Minister Bannister, and the many other cabinet ministers that may be involved in this process to please take a different approach.
The noted Queen's Counsel also made this plea to the residents of such communities.
So I urge all of the people in these communities to also stand up for their rights. They have squatters' rights. They have rights under the Building Control Regulations Act. They have the right to claim entitlement if they've been there a certain number of years. But more to the point, they have a right to be respected as human beings. Just because they don't have, a lot of money, they don't live out west in Nassau or out east in Nassau. They can't afford, in many cases, these are many of them poor people, people who do not have means, people that have struggled to create what little they have in these communities. We have to stop being so brutish in our country.
Earlier this month, 32 structures in the mud were destroyed by fire, displacing 95 people. That's 33 men, 25 women, and 37 children. It was the second fire there in just over a month. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.